Summer promised to be hot and dry. While tourists on the coast enjoyed this prospect and found it somewhat exciting, local residents were not pleased with the prospect of another sweltering season. In a lavish mansion by the ocean, it was quiet and calm. Suddenly, the silence was shattered like hot knife through butter by a child's cry. Rafael was throwing a tantrum. Francesca, the mother of the 2-month-old baby, instantly woke up upon hearing her son's cry. She strained to get up from her chair and made her way to the nursery with its splendid canopy. "What's wrong, my boy?" "My little one," she said. Hearing her familiar voice, the baby fell silent for a couple of seconds and then cried out even louder. Francesca approached the crib, leaned over, and strained her muscles to lift the baby from the soft, waterproof mattress. By the way, Rafael was not at all a little baby. When he was born, he weighed 4,800 grams and measured 55 centimeters in height. He was a real giant, whom the slender and graceful Francesca delivered herself, without the need for a cesarean section, despite the insistence of both doctors and Fernando, her husband, and even her mother-in-law, who couldn't stand her daughter-in-law. But the young woman decided that Rafael should come into the world naturally through her mother's birth canal. She sincerely believed that this would establish a telepathic and extrasensory connection between her and Rafael. By the way, the mother-in-law's dislike for her daughter-in-law had a perfectly understandable explanation. Senora Catalina Ramos believed that her son Fernando, the heir of the illustrious Ramos lineage, deserved better than Francesca. She came from a family of average antique dealers. And in the dreams of the proud and glory-seeking Catalina, there was a desire to be related to a family with ancient royal roots leading back to Frederick II Barbarossa or Charlemagne. But Fernando didn't care about his wife's lineage. Usually, girls from wealthy and famous families are capricious, know their worth, have a strong character, and can leave if they don't like something. Because they have somewhere to go. But Francesca had nowhere to go. Her mother died during childbirth, and her father passed away before his daughter got married. Of course, he left his only daughter an antique shop as inheritance. That's where Francesca and Fernando met. But as soon as the couple got married, Francesca sold the shop, as she was destined to live comfortably in the splendid mansion by the ocean. But she didn't even realize the price she would have to pay for such a fairy tale life. Fernando was a real tyrant and had raised his hand to his wife more than once. And the young orphan girl had no one to complain to. And the Ramos family had such connections that any misdeed could be overlooked. Francesca dreamed of escaping from the wealthy mansion, leaving the city, or simply disappearing. Living with Fernando was becoming increasingly difficult. Just 4 years ago, he seemed perfect to her. He was her Prince Charming, and she was a true Cinderella. That's why she agreed to marry him after only 3 months of knowing him. She was madly in love with the self-centered, selfish Fernando, who was completely devoid of love. He married Francesca because he needed an heir, a son who would continue his legacy. Fernando couldn't find a match from within his circle. The women around him grew up in wealth and luxury, just like him. So enticing them with material wealth was impossible, so as soon as Fernando's true nature revealed itself, the girls easily broke off these relationships and left. Francesca couldn't leave. Fernando blocked her path to retreat immediately after the wedding when he insisted on selling the antique shop. They got married, and the girl's life turned into a hell. She was too thin, and doctors said she couldn't bear a child. Instead of supporting his wife, Fernando shouted that he had made a mistake, he had chosen the wrong one, and he couldn't divorce her because it would be shameful. For 3.5 years, they tried to conceive a child, but it was all in vain. Every time the doctor said, "Pregnancy hasn't occurred," Fernando would rage and throw things. Without any shame in front of the doctors, he yelled at Francesca that she wasn't a woman but a pitiful semblance because she couldn't give birth to a child. Francesca was in despair. Her soul was burning. On that day, late at night, when everyone had fallen asleep, she went to the coast. The girl found a quiet place surrounded by rocks on one side and huge stones on the other. She had to climb over slippery boulders covered with slime to reach a place where there was no one around. She quietly gazed at the dark waters and realized that she couldn't live like this anymore. And nothing held her in this world anymore. She took off her light silk dress and walked to the ocean. During all the time she lived here, on the coast, she never learned to swim. She took step by step, not afraid, going further and further until her head was completely underwater. Francesca realized that all her suffering would end now. The end would come now. And when the girl almost lost consciousness, she had a vision. She saw a boy playing the violin. He got distracted, stopped playing, and turned to Francesca. "Mom, come back home. I need you, Mom." At that moment, Francesca surfaced abruptly and began to greedily gasp for air with her lips. She thrashed, resurfacing, then diving back underwater. Francesca realized that she was unlikely to make it to the shore since she couldn't swim at all. She went underwater again, as if someone suddenly grabbed her by the hair. A dark silhouette pulled Francesca onto the shore. When the girl coughed, she looked at her savior. "Irina, what are you doing here?" "I'm sorry, señorita. I followed you." Irina worked as a maid in the Ramos family mansion. This Russian girl always seemed strange to Francesca, but she was doing her job perfectly, and now she saved her life. "Why were you following me?" "To save you," the maid replied calmly. "But how did you know?" Francesca was extremely surprised by the girl's insight. "Something made me wake up in the middle of the night. I decided to go outside for some fresh air and saw you leaving somewhere. Somewhere beyond the mansion. I know that Senor Ramos forbids you to go anywhere without his escort. He keeps you in the mansion, like..." Irina stopped herself. "Like a captive," Francesca finished the sentence. Realizing that she might have offended or even insulted Mr. Fernando Ramos's wife with her straightforwardness, Irina hastily continued. "Anyway, I felt something was wrong and followed you. As if an unknown force pushed me." Francesca hugged Irina. "Thank you. You were in the right place at the right time. Let's keep this our secret, okay?" "As you wish, Sonora," Irina replied, and they both headed back to the mansion. No one ever found out about this incident. Irina knew how to keep secrets and keep her mouth shut. Moreover, the maid understood what Fernando would do to his wife if he found out about it. And a month later, Francesca finally became pregnant. The pregnancy was difficult, but the girl followed all the doctor's recommendations. She finally found a purpose in life, and she carried this purpose under her heart. With the birth of the child, Francesca's life changed. She experienced genuine maternal happiness. Although Fernando didn't change his attitude towards his wife and still shouted and brought the young, newly born girl to tears. He said she was feeding Rafael wrong, washing him wrong, swaddling him wrong. And when the baby cried, Fernando simply slammed the door and left to avoid hearing anything. Catalina, Fernando's mother, added fuel to the fire. She constantly nitpicked at her daughter-in-law, even over trivial matters. But over time, Francesca learned to let their words go in one ear and out the other. When her husband and mother-in-law said something, yelled, demanded, Francesca didn't even pay attention to their words. She pretended to listen carefully, but she was thinking about her own matters. It was Irina, the maid, who gave her this advice. Irina, in turn, was always there and helped the young mother. After that incident on the coast, they started talking, and their communication turned into friendship. Although they had to hide it from Fernando and his mother, otherwise Irina would have been quickly fired. The maid not only helped with the child, but also gave practical advice. It was with her clever plan that Catalina could be sent on vacation to other countries for several months. It looked like a gift, but in reality, it was a gift for Francesca herself, to live without the intrusive mother-in-law for at least a couple of months. Rafael Ramos grew up to be a smart and well-behaved boy. Credit should be given, his upbringing was solely his mother's responsibility. His father, on the other hand, worked constantly and simply waited for the day when his son would grow up and take his place. There was no emotional connection between father and son. Year after year passed. When it was time for Rafael to go to school, the family decided to move to the capital so their son could attend the most expensive elite private school. They decided not to sell the mansion on the coast. Catalina would continue to live there. However, they would have to dismiss half of the household staff. Of course, they immediately fired Irina. After all, Catalina noticed how the maid always interacted kindly and amiably with Francesca. Francesca and Irina promised each other that they would definitely find each other, definitely meet again. But that promise would never be fulfilled, as at that time there were neither cell phones nor the internet. Francesca gave Irina an envelope with money. The maid refused for a long time, but Mrs. Ramos insisted. "You saved my life not only back then on the coast, but every day just by being there. I saved this money for you secretly from my husband for several years. Just accept this envelope and never forget me." They said goodbye with tears in their eyes. They would never see each other again in their lives. Many years passed. Rafael grew up, finished school, college. He received education at Harvard, becoming a lawyer, and then obtained a doctoral degree in jurisprudence. Rafael's father, Fernando, owned a diversified business and was involved in construction, supply, and logistics. He tried to involve his son in the business during his studies, but Rafael consistently thwarted his father's attempts. Later, Fernando wished to appoint his son as vice president of his holding company. But Rafael said he would achieve everything on his own and wrote to his father that he was ready to work in the legal department of Ramos & Co. as a regular clerk, wanting to start his career from scratch. 10 more years passed. Rafael turned 40, and he modestly celebrated his birthday without much luxury or pomp, quite modestly for his status as vice president of one of the country's largest holdings. His father and mother, Rafael's wife, and their daughter, along with the old lady Catalina, were the main guests at the party. It was here, in the luxurious restaurant of the capital's Grand Hotel, that Fernando Ramos made his main gift to his son and his family. Rafael Ramos was now becoming the president of the company and chairman of the holding's board of directors. The Ramos, both father and son, were not afraid of their business being absorbed. Fernando owned 100% of the organization's shares. He continued to be the owner even after deciding to retire on his son's birthday, handing over the reins of Ramos & Co. to his offspring. He kept the shares for himself. Yes, Rafael gained experience, became a real business shark, ruthless to opponents and competitors, but fair to his employees as a leader. The son thanked his father for the gift, hugged and kissed his mother, bowed to his grandmother, sat down next to his wife and daughter, and then the festive evening slowly began to approach its inevitable conclusion. Time passed, life flowed in its course. On that hot sunny day, everyone felt subdued, although they had long been prepared for such an outcome. Catalina Ramos lay on her deathbed. She peacefully concluded her journey at the age of 98, simply not waking up. Rafael took charge of all the funeral arrangements and management. His father, Fernando, who had unconditionally loved his mother, would sit by the casket for hours, talking to her as if wanting to tell her everything he hadn't had the chance to during Catalina's lifetime. He also confessed his filial love for his mother, who, though not loving her son's spouse and never approving of his choice, had passed away. Catalina, the grandmother who had long made Francesca's life miserable, departed from this world. And Rafael, who had not been particularly fond of his grandmother either, breathed a sigh of relief. But could the newly appointed president of Ramos & Co. holding company know that Catalina would still make her presence felt? It was a typical sunny morning when Ramos gathered himself and left his countryside home. He decided not to go to work but to meet his longtime business partner in a restaurant to discuss the intricacies of a rather dubious deal. He was greatly disturbed by the apparent lack of transparency in the capital attraction scheme for implementing the project. Pedro Gomez, agile and sharp, astute and enterprising businessman, as always, arrived late for the meeting and sat down at Rafael's table without apologies. They talked for about 2 hours until one of the businessmen's phone reminded him of something. "It's time for me to go, another meeting," said Rafael. "Don't forget to send me the calculations by email." I'll review the coefficients, and then we'll talk about implementation. He waved to the waiter, asking for the bill. Will you be paying by card or cash? By card, Rafael replied. He placed his card on the card reader, but the payment didn't go through. He tried another card, then a third. Unsuccessfully. Then, Pedro politely placed his card on the terminal and settled the bill. That's strange, it must be something with my bank cards. Thank you, Pedro. I should stop by the bank, Rafael concluded, heading towards the exit. Rafael got into his car and rushed to the bank. Upon entering the building, he was completely calm, confident that they would quickly rectify this mistake. Imagine his surprise when the bank manager bluntly responded, "Your account has been closed by your father." Rafael was in shock. Could his father close his account? Did he have the authority to do so? He quickly dialed his father's number. After several rings, Fernando Ramos's voice came through, and his words shocked Rafael. "You are not my son. Your mother had you with another man. Gather your courage, come to the office, handle your affairs, and leave." It was a bolt from the blue. Everything became clear simply when Catalina Ramos' inheritance was opened. Aside from dividing the property among the heirs, Fernando received a letter written by his mother. It said, "Son, I have kept silent for a long time, but I cannot take this information to my grave. Rafael is not your son. This snake had him with your former business partner when you were away on a conference on modern information technologies in the construction industry. You went to another city, and she stayed in the room. That's where it all happened. The concierge told me everything. Make your decision yourself." It was a scandal. Fernando was so angry that he could do something terrible. Francesca was lucky that she wasn't home at that moment. It's unknown what he would have done to his wife. Although one can guess, knowing that he would raise his hand against her even if she oversalted the soup. And Rafael understood perfectly well that in this situation, he needed to save not himself, but his mother. The most Fernando could do to him was strip Rafael of all his money. But for Rafael, it was important that Fernando didn't deprive his mother. Without hesitation, the man went home. That's where he kept a safe with cash. On the way, he called his mother to find out where she was. Francesca, unsuspecting, was leisurely walking in the park, watching the birds. She had missed numerous calls from her husband, but she never answered Fernando's calls because she knew she would only hear shouting and accusations. Rafael parked near the park and found his mother. "Mommy, let's go." "Home?" "No, not home. I'll take you to the store. It's a surprise." Francesca loved her son's surprises, so she happily got into the expensive crossover. But a couple of hours later, the elderly woman felt something was wrong. "Son, where are we going?" "To the store, I told you." "Don't deceive your mother, tell me." And then Rafael confessed everything. He said he would take her somewhere far from Fernando so she would be safe. Francesca looked grimly out the window. She could have said that Fernando was the one and only man in her life, but for some reason, she remained silent. Perhaps because all her life she had dreamed of escaping. But she couldn't leave her son, even now that he was grown. Rafael was speeding on the highway. They had been driving for quite some time. Fernando kept calling his wife and son, but none of them dared to answer him. The only person Rafael called was his wife. He explained everything to her and asked her not to worry. Mother and son were driving until it got dark. They decided to stay overnight at a roadside motel and set off again in the morning. During this time, Rafael and Francesca talked about anything but Fernando and the incident that had occurred. They simply enjoyed each other's company, not understanding what would come next. Rafael remembered how his mother had always been there, always supporting and helping. He remembered how they used to play the violin together. And Francesca lovingly looked at her son, understanding what she had lived this life for. The next day, Francesca and Rafael drove through a small, completely unfamiliar town. They decided to stop there to buy food and water. "Pull over by that store," Francesca said. "As you wish, Mom." An elderly woman got out, leaving her purse in the car. Rafael took the bag and put almost all the money he had into it. Luckily, the bag was almost empty, and everything fit inside. He also got out of the car and followed his mother into the store. "Mom, take the bag." "Why did you bring it?" "It could have stayed in the car," the woman said, taking the bag and understanding everything by its weight. She looked into her son's eyes. They were filled with tears. "I love you," Rafael said and ran back to the car. He turned the ignition key and pressed the gas pedal. He had to return to the capital and talk to his father. Francesca walked through the antique shop and noticed the violin. She used to love playing it. And she even found the best violin teacher for Rafael. Then her son fell in love with this musical instrument. Back when they still lived in the mansion by the ocean, Francesca loved to go out onto the balcony and play pieces by the great classics. But Fernando never liked it. He didn't like anything at all. But their son fully shared her passion. The old lady put her purse, filled with cash, on the floor and took the stringed instrument. Francesca closed her eyes and drew the bow across the strings. She mentally went back to the day when she almost drowned. She remembered her vision and recalled the melody played by the boy, her son. The first notes were born slowly, as if sounds from the past emerged from her soul, penetrating every quiver of the strings. The antique shop became quiet, as if time itself slowed down to listen to the story told through music. Francesca recalled her youth, love, and the hardships she had endured. The violin became not only an instrument, but also a magical key to her soul, unlocking all the shades of her past. The melody filled the shop, and the listeners, including passers-by, stood still, absorbing this flow of time. Tears, like precious drops, ran down the cheeks of those who heard this concert. Francesca's melody touched not only her soul, but also the hearts of those standing in the shop. The last notes faded away. Francesca looked up from the violin and met the admiring and touched eyes of her audience. In that moment, she felt that her life, like music, carried within it a power capable of uniting people, reminding them of the value of every moment in this endless journey. An elderly woman approached the shopkeeper. "I want to buy this violin." "I'm sorry, madam, but this violin is not for sale." "I am willing to pay whatever amount you name." "This violin is priceless," replied the young girl. "My grandmother once owned this shop. When she was young, she worked as a maid. An unfortunate but wealthy woman she worked for gave her a large sum of money when she left. She said they were great friends. My grandmother didn't squander the money. She came to this town and purposefully bought this shop, as this antique store once belonged to that woman. So when she finally found and bought this shop, she went to the mansion where she worked, hoping to find her friend there. But instead, she met a horribly mean woman who happened to be her friend's mother-in-law. She said that her son, his wife, and their child died in a car accident while moving to the capital. It was a shock for my grandmother. She was about to leave in tears when the mean woman stopped her and said, "Take your friend's violin, I don't need it." "And I recognized my violin right away," interrupted Francesca, "only there was no accident." "Here's Catalina, here's the snake," cursed the old lady. Exactly, the mean woman was called Catalina. Wait a moment, the young girl opened an old trunk and pulled out an envelope. Inside the envelope were a photograph and a letter. "Isn't this yours?" Francesca took the black and white photograph, yellowed with age, into her hands. In the photo, she saw her younger self and 3-year-old Rafael. The old lady set aside the photograph and unfolded the letter. Recognizing her handwriting, she read, "Irina, I will never forget you. You will always be in my memory, in my heart. And you, never forget me. Take my picture for that. I am grateful to you for everything, for being there when I needed it so much. Thank you for helping me with Rafael. I'm sorry I refused to run away with you to another city. I can't leave Rafael, and if I take him with me, Fernando will easily find us and destroy us. You understand that? Yes, maybe I won't live the best life, but I am already happy because God introduced me to you and gave me a son. With you, I felt truly alive, and that's the most beautiful feeling. And so that we can meet again, promise me to come to the mansion in one of the summer months. I think when Rafael has school holidays, we'll come here as a family. After all, I hope we're not saying goodbye forever because the love I feel for you is like an invisible thread that connects us even 1,000 miles apart. Francesca cried and turned to the girl. So Irina is your grandmother? Yeah. Where is she now? Francesca asked hopefully. She's no longer alive, came the reply. Meanwhile, Francesca cried as she held her best friend's granddaughter. Rafael raced down the highway, hoping to reach his father's house faster. However, he only arrived deep into the night. With a key in hand, he quietly entered, opening the front door. Walking into the living room, he noticed his drunken father holding some papers. Rafael cautiously took the papers in his hands. It turned out to be a paternity test. The man looked at Rafael, then back at the DNA test results. Boldly written on it was, the match between the presented biological material number 1 and number 2 is 99.99%. It meant Fernando was his biological father. He immediately called his mother, despite the late hour. A sleepy voice on the other end answered. Son, what's wrong? Mom, are you okay? Are you at the hotel? No, I'm in a good place. It's much better here than at the hotel. Mom, where are you? I'll come get you. Why didn't you tell me that Grandma Catalina lied? You never cheated on Dad. He's my biological father. If I had told you everything right away, you would never have taken me to my favorite antique shop, which I sold, believing in the Cinderella tale. God himself led me here, to the very beginning. I recognized this town from the start and once had my own shop here. And I'm not leaving here for anything. I've walked my path, raised a smart, kind, caring son. And now I want to be here. Good night, my dear son. Francesca never returned to the capital. At first, she lived with Irina's granddaughter. Then Rafael secretly bought a house for her in that town. Rafael's accounts were unblocked the same day Fernando confirmed his paternity. He asked his son for forgiveness, but Rafael never told him where he took his mother. Rafael didn't forget to visit his mother, and he constantly sent her money. Finally, the woman who had gone through a difficult life journey found herself in a happy place, at the beginning. Where it all started.